The battle between a Democrat known as Mayor 1% and a host of challengers has reached a fever pitch in Chicago. Mayor 1% is what critics call Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who is struggling to keep his seat when voters head to the polls on Tuesday. Opponents say he's failed to improve the city's schools and address gun violence. Emanuel's re-election campaign has a war chest of more than $15 million, about 4 times the amount raised by his 4 opponents combined. Most of his funds come from about 100 donors. About half of the money, more than $7 million, has been spent on television ads like this one.
Chicago's leading voices support Rahm Emanuel for mayor. The Defender backs Rahm, praising the largest job gains of any major city. The Tribune says because of Mayor Emanuel, students spend more hours in the classroom and have full-day kindergarten. The Sun-Times called Rahm bold and courageous. And President Obama says Emanuel is the mayor we need.
He's making sure every Chicagoan in every neighborhood gets the fair shot at success that they deserve.
Featured in that ad is President Obama, who visited Chicago last week to endorse his former White House chief of staff.
Emanuel faces 5 challengers in a nonpartisan race that requires him to win 51% of the vote or face a runoff in April. The city hasn't seen a runoff since it adopted the nonpartisan system in the 1990s. His closest rival is Jesus Chuy Garcia, a county commissioner who has support from the Chicago Teachers Union and other labor and progressive groups. Polls show about 20% of voters back Garcia. The other 3 candidates are businessman Willie Wilson, Chicago Alderman Robert Fioretti, and William Doc Walls, who is a former aide to the former Chicago Mayor Harold Washington. Well, for more, we're going to Chicago to speak with journalist Rick Perlstein. His recent piece for In These Times is headlined, "How to Sell Off a City." Welcome to Rahm Emanuel Chicago, the privatized metropolis of the future. Rick, welcome to Democracy Now! Why don't you lay out this race for people who are not closely following it, especially those outside Chicago?
Absolutely. It's a strikingly stark choice for the voters tomorrow about who's going to control the city. Is it going to be the citizens or the 1% or the 0.1%? Juan mentioned that he raised $15 million. I refer to Rahm Emanuel. That's misleading. He actually raised $30 million, $15 million for his political action committee that he's used to basically create a new Chicago political machine, and the things he's been able to get away with that money is absolutely stark, absolutely horrifying, and we really face a crossroads for the city tomorrow.
Well, Rick, why don't you lay out some of the signature initiatives that Emanuel embarked on during his first term?
Well, it's pretty striking. With a month to go before the election, when the advertising started, he basically made him sound like Eleanor Roosevelt. He did talk about things like some actually excellent work he's done with the community colleges and a minimum wage hike that's going to be phased in over 10 years. But the fact of the matter is his real work has been in things like privatization. He struck a deal with a bunch of investment banks to use the preschoolers of Chicago as collateral for a deal in which a bunch of bankers are going to get money if the test scores of preschool kids increase. He did things like privatize the janitorial corps in Chicago schools, and they did such a bad job. This is the company Aramark, the services company based in Pennsylvania, that parents had to come in a week before the school year and clean the schools themselves. And Aramark's response to that was to cut a quarter of its workforce. It goes on and on and on. There's been some excellent investigative journalism by the very publications that have shamefully endorsed Rahm Emanuel. The Chicago Tribune found that of his top 106 donors, 60 of them had received favors from the city. The Sun-Times did a really amazing expose on a member of the school board that he appointed. We have an appointed school board in Chicago, which is also a scandal, who is an investment, who runs an investment fund for school privatization companies, and discovered that her company had basically increased its billing with the Chicago Public Schools about 300% 100%, and that a lot of these contracts were for $24,999, because if they're for $25,000 or more, then you actually have to have accountability. A final investigative report by the International Business Times found that he's using a kind of secret slush fund called direct voucher payments, in which he's able to shovel money to his contributors without contracts, without bidding, and without any kind of paper trail about how they're spending the money, whether they're using it to provide services to the city or not. He is really, really, really been a strikingly corrupt mayor, and his ability to get away with it, if he gets away with it tomorrow, will redound to the shame of the citizenry of this city.
Rick Perlstein, we're going to break and then come back to this discussion. Rick Perlstein is a Chicago-based reporter whose recent piece in these Times was headlined, "How to Sell Off a City." Welcome to Rahm Emanuel Chicago, the privatized metropolis of the future. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back with Rick Perlstein in a minute.